Is it a good thing or a bad thing that it's becoming harder, maybe impossible, to encapsulate information in discrete units and sell them? The simplistic answer, the answer that you get from Hollywood and the recording industry, is it's a disaster.
This is not a film about piracy.
The recording industry's been freaked out. The movie industry's been freaked out. The suits don't know how to think about this.
This is not a film about sharing files.
They put a lot of money into making those movies, making that music, so they want to get something back. But the way they're trying to stop the copying now, it's definitely not working.
It's a film that explores massive changes in the way we produce, distribute, and consume media.
Ever since Napster, the music industry has been trying to kill file sharing, right? Napster was this huge global party of, everybody suddenly had access to the largest music library in the world. And what did they do? Well, they went after Napster and they shut it down.
Napster, Aimster, Audio Galaxy, Grokster, iMesh, Kazaa, all of these companies were sued. And in the end, essentially, the entertainment industry succeeded in driving that technology out of the mainstream commercial field. The industry's turned to suing individuals, hundreds of individuals, ultimately thousands, now tens of thousands of individuals, for downloading music without permission.
Existing players are trying to make certain things happen that in retrospect will seem kind of barbaric.
If you're talking about the distribution of cultural material, of music and cinema, well, there is a long history of whatever the incumbent industry happens to be, resisting whatever new technology provides.
Cable television in the 70s was viewed really as a pirate medium. All the television networks felt that taking their content and putting it on cables that ran to people's houses was piracy, pure and simple.
The video recorder was very strongly resisted by Hollywood.
There were lawsuits immediately brought by the movie studios who felt, in fact, who said publicly that the VCR was to the American movie industry what the Boston Strangler was to a woman alone.
New information technologies provide Hollywood and the recording industries with fresh channels on which to sell products. But they can also open unplanned possibilities for their consumers.
The sheet music people resisted the recordings.
The first MP3 player by Diamond Rio, sort of the initial company long before the iPod, they were met with a lawsuit.
The possibilities suggested by peer-to-peer technologies have prompted the entertainment industries to react in an unprecedented way.
Traditionally, copyright infringement has just been a civil matter. If a copyright owner catches you doing something wrong, they can sue you and force you to pay them money. Criminal infringement liability, the ability to prosecute you and throw you in jail, has been reserved for circumstances of commercial piracy. It's circumstances where, someone has made 500 copies, is selling them on the street as a competition for the real thing. Well, in recent years, copyright owners have not been satisfied with that. They have wanted to reach out and have criminal recourse against people who are engaged in non-commercial activities.
We recognize and we know that we will never stop piracy, never. We just have to try to make it as difficult and as tedious as possible, and we have to let people know there are consequences if they're caught.
What they've sought to do is sue a few people punish them severely enough that they can essentially intimidate a large number of other people. It's really as though they decided to intimidate the village, they would just chop off the heads of a few villagers, mount those heads on pikes as a warning to everyone else.
The fact that the DVD writer is the new weapon of mass destruction in the world is primarily for the fact that a $50 billion film can be reproduced at the cost of, let's see, 10 or 15 cents.
There is a fantastic quote by Mark Getty, who is the owner of Getty Images, which is a huge corporate image database, and he's one of the largest intellectual proprietors in the world. He once said, intellectual property is the oil of the 21st century. It's a fantastic quote. You can condense it to one word, that is war. He declared war with that, saying, we will fight for this stuff, these completely hallucinatory rights to images, ideas, texts, thoughts, inventions, just as we're fighting now for access to natural resources. He declared war. Strange kind of war. I would take it serious, but it's ridiculous and serious at the same time.
This is not the first war that has been fought over the production, reproduction, and distribution of information.
People like to see the contemporary and the digital era as some kind of a unique break. And I think the important point to make here is not to see it as a unique break, but really to see it as a moment which accelerates things that have already happened in the past.
Before the arrival of the printing press in Europe in the 1500s, information was highly scarce and relatively easy to control.
For thousands of years, the scribal culture really handpicked the people who were given this code to transmit knowledge across time and space.
It's an economy of scarcity that you're dealing with. People are starved, in a sense, for more books.
There are images from the 16th century of books that were chained and had to be guarded by armed guards outside a heavy, heavy door, because it is very, very dangerous for people to have access to that.
Print brought with it a new abundance of information, threatening the control over ideas that had come with scarcity. Daniel Defoe tells of Gutenberg's partner Johann Fust arriving in 15th century Paris with a wagon load of printed Bibles. When the Bibles were examined and the exact similarity of each book was discovered, the Parisians set upon Fust, accusing him of black magic. About to change everything, this new communications technology was seen as the unholy work of the devil.
All of the emerging nation states of Europe made it very clear that they would control information flows to the best of their ability.
The printers were the ones who were hunted down if they printed the forbidden text. So more than we think of persecuting the authors, but it was really the printers who suffered most.
As print technology developed in Europe and America, its pivotal social role became clear.
Printing becomes associated with rebellion and emancipation. There's the governor of Virginia, Governor Berkeley, who wrote to his overseers in England in the 17th century saying, "Thank God we have no printing in Virginia, and we shall never have it as long as I'm governor." This was a reaction to the English Civil War and the pamphlet wars, and they were called paper bullets in that period.
The basic idea of censorship in 18th century France is the concept of privilege or private law. a publisher gets the right to publish a particular text that is denied to others. So he has that privilege. What you have is a centralized administration for controlling the book trade, using censorship, and also using the monopoly of the established publishers.
They made sure that the books that flowed throughout a society were the authorized editions, but also were within the control of the state, within the control of the king or the prince.
You had a very elaborate system of censorship, but in addition to that, you had a monopoly of production in a booksellers' guild in Paris. It had police powers, and then the police itself had specialized inspectors of the book trade. So you put all of that together, and the state was very powerful in its attempt to control the printed word.
But not only was this apparatus incapable of preventing the spread of revolutionary thought, its very existence inspired the creation of new, parallel, pirate systems of distribution.
What is clear is that during the 18th century, the printed word as a force is just expanding everywhere. You've got publishing houses, printing presses that surround France in what I call a fertile crescent. Dozens and dozens of them producing books which are smuggled across the French borders, distributed everywhere in the kingdom by an underground system.
I have a case of one Dutch printer who looked at the index of prohibited books and used it for his publication program because he knew these were titles that would sell well.
The pirates had agents in Paris and everywhere else who are sending them sheets of new books which they think will sell well. The pirates are systematically doing, I use the word, it's an anachronism, market research. They do it, I've seen it in hundreds and literally thousands of letters. They are sounding the market. They want to know what demand is. And so the reaction on the part of the publishers at the center is, of course, extremely hostile. And I've read a lot of their letters. They're full of expressions like buccaneer and private and people without shame or morality, etc. In actual fact, many of these pirates were good bourgeois in Lausanne or Geneva or Amsterdam, and they thought that they were just doing business. After all, there was no international copyright law, and they were satisfying demand.
There were printers that were almost holes in the wall or down in the... If they were printing subversive material, they could sort of hide their presses very quickly. People used to put them on rafts and float down to another town if they were in trouble with the authorities. It was very movable.
In effect, you've got two systems at war with one another, and it's the system of production outside France that is crucial for the Enlightenment. Not only did this new media system spread the Enlightenment, but I won't use the word prepared the way for the revolution. It so indicted the old regime that this power, public opinion, became crucial in the collapse of the government in 1787, 1788.
In Paris, the Bastille had been a prison for pirates. But in the years before the revolution, the authorities gave up trying to imprison pirates. The flow of ideas and information was too strong to be stemmed.
And I think that's the dramatic change that was affected by the printing revolution, where all of a sudden the emergence of a new reading public, the emergence of an undisciplined reading public, which were not subject to the same norms of reading or the same norms of our relation to knowledge as it was in the past, was the dramatic shift.
The fundamental urge to copy has nothing to do with technology. It's about how culture is created. But technology, of course, changes what we can copy, how quickly we can copy, and how we can share it.
What happens when a copying mechanism is invented? And you can take the printing press or you can take BitTorrent. It shapes people's habits. It gives people completely new ideas how they could work together, how they could share, what they could relate to, what their lives could be.
There's no way that an absolutist political system can totally suppress the spread of information. New media adapt themselves to these circumstances, and often they can become even more effective because of the repression.
Why should improvements in our capacity to copy be linked to social change? Because communicating, so fundamental to what we do in the world, is itself an act of copying.
The one technique that brought us to where we are is copying.
Sharing is at the heart of, in some senses, existence. Communication, the need to talk to someone, is an act of sharing. The need to listen to someone is an act of sharing.
Why do we share culture? Why do we share language? Because we imitate each other. This is how we learn to speak. This is how a baby learns. This is how new things come into society and spread through society. Basically, what keeps us together is that we copy from each other.
When the spoken word was our only means of communication, we traveled far and wide to deliver it to others. Later, as we began to communicate in written form, armies of scribes multiplied our ideas. Our urge to communicate is so strong that we have always pushed the tools available to us to the limit, then gone beyond them, creating new technologies that reproduce our ideas on previously unimaginable scales. In 1957, the USSR launched Sputnik. In response, the American government authorized massive blue sky spending on science and technology, overseen by a new Advanced Research Projects Agency. It was ARPA, developing the ideas of visionary computer scientist Joseph Licklider, that came up with the concept of networking computers.
It's been hard to share information for years. The printing press, of course, was the great step into sharing information, and we have been needing for a long time some better way to distribute information than to carry it about. The print on paper form is embarrassing because in order to distribute it, you've got to move the paper around, and lots of paper gets to be bulky and heavy and expensive to move about.
The ARPANET was designed to allow scientists to share computer resources in order to improve innovation. To make this vision work, ARPANET had to allow each machine on the network to reproduce and relay the information sent by any other. A network in which peers shared resources equally was part of a massive shift from the corporate and commercial communication systems of the past, in which messages radiated from a central point or down through a hierarchy. There was no center, and no machine was more important than another. Anyone could join the network, provided they agreed to abide by the rules or protocols on which it operated.
Ever since really the 60s onwards, packet switched networks are the predominant style of communications used today. Increasingly so in both voice and data.
The Western world was transforming itself from the rigid production systems of Fordism to fluid work, lean production, and just-in-time delivery.
It's a wonderful age on a beautiful stage demonstrated for you, been created for you. It's just a part of the thrilling start of
a post-centralized, friction-free economy needed a communications system just like this.
We didn't build in the 1970s networks of hierarchs. The computers that existed in the world were all multi-million-dollar machines, and they basically interrelated to one another in very equal ways.
One of the really important characteristics of the internet is that it's extremely decentralized, and that the services on the internet are invented and operated by other network users.
The network is built so that there's nobody in charge, that everybody has control over their own communications.
In relying on the internet, society was bringing into its very center a machine whose primary function was the reproduction and distribution of information.
It's an inherent function of the networks that we use today that this data is stored and copied, stored and copied. Normally transient, normally very fast, in milliseconds, microseconds. Specialized pieces of equipment such as switches, routers, hubs, etc. do this all in the blink of an eye.